By the year 2050, the global population is projected to hit nearly 10 billion people. To keep everyone fed, macroeconomic models show we will need to produce 50 to 70% more agricultural output than we do today. The core problem is how we currently get our protein. This stacked bar chart compares the environmental footprint of animal agriculture to its output. It takes up nearly 80% of all agricultural land and generates 14.5% of global emissions, yet it supplies less than 20% of the world's caloric intake. Venture capitalists responded to this ecological mission by pumping $19.4 billion into the sector between 2016 and 2025. They treated complex biological food manufacturing like software-as-a-service startups, pricing physical goods for the frictionless scale of a Silicon Valley app. Take a look at this line chart tracking Beyond Meat's early trajectory. Pushed by consultancies projecting the sector would capture 22% of the global meat market by 2035, investors drove Beyond Meat's market cap to $14.1 billion, a staggering 47 times its 2019 revenue. Wall Street priced a low-margin, incredibly complex physical supply chain as if it were a flawless software platform. That single assumption doomed the sector from the start. Food manufacturing operates in the fast-moving consumer goods sector, or FMCG. It requires physical factories, vast shipping logistics, and raw ingredient procurement. When high inflation hit and top-line growth stalled, the physical reality of the supply chain crushed those software-level valuations. This chart tracks Beyond Meat's equity collapse. The stock dropped 99.7%, falling from $234.90 down to roughly 60 cents. Looking at unit economics, in a single quarter, Beyond posted an adjusted EBITDA loss of $69 million, a catastrophic negative 112% margin. The private markets suffered the exact same contagion. Secondary shares of Impossible Foods traded at a 95% discount. Global startup funding cratered to just $881 million, and over 40 major alternative protein companies either went bankrupt or completely liquidated. 40 corporate casualties in 12 months signal a mass extinction of food tech firms that relied on external subsidies rather than operational profit. To understand why the financials failed, we have to look at actual consumer behavior. This pie chart illustrates the grocery landscape in Europe. While the media heavily publicized a €16.3 billion plant-based market, it actually represents a tiny 2.4% sliver of total fast-moving consumer goods sales. In the United States, retail data shows a stark divergence within that small sliver. Dollar sales of highly processed fake meat plunged 10%, while traditional whole food plant proteins like blocks of tofu or tempeh actually increased volume by 6%. The primary issue was the product itself. If we look at this radar chart mapping a blind taste test by Nectar, fake meats are 62% less likely to be considered juicy and 35% less likely to be described as savory or umami compared to conventional meat. Consumers noticed. Tracking data reveals that 46% of U.S. buyers who abandoned the plant-based meat category entirely did so because of taste dissatisfaction and distinct off-flavors. The ecological novelty of a bleeding plant burger is enough to drive an initial trial purchase, but the mainstream omnivore will permanently reject any product that demands a daily sensory sacrifice. Beyond the taste deficit, plant-based meat remains about twice as expensive as conventional beef. Ironically, price parity might finally arrive by late 2026, but only because severe droughts and a massive cattle shortage are projected to force conventional ground beef up to $10 a pound. At the same time, the industry's health halo collapsed. The NOVA classification system categorizes foods based on industrial processing. Highly engineered plant meats packed with modified starches and chemical emulsifiers were definitively labeled Category 4, ultra-processed foods, or UPFs. Clinical trials consistently show that plant-based meats actually reduce LDL cholesterol, but that scientific nuance was drowned out by wellness influencers and negative headlines. Today, 77% of food companies cite consumer anxiety over UPFs as their absolute biggest roadblock to growth. The $300 billion incumbent meat industry recognized this vulnerability and weaponized it. They spent an estimated $5.5 million in Washington lobbying in a single year, funding aggressive campaigns to brand alternative proteins as unnatural frankenmeat. Conservative political movements heavily amplified this rhetoric. Figures within the Make America Healthy Again movement explicitly targeted the category, alienating a massive demographic of right-leaning consumers who view traditional animal agriculture as a core part of their cultural identity. This cultural backlash quickly became statutory law. By early 2026, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals upheld 5 state-level bans on the sale and manufacture of cultivated meat, including a high-profile block in Florida. This ruling legally fractures the United States market. It creates a convoluted patchwork of state-level embargoes that severely chills venture capital investment and prevents these companies from achieving national economies of scale. The fake meat sector was caught in a fatal crossfire: too expensive for the working class, too processed for the wellness crowd, and culturally threatening for the right. To survive this hostile environment, the remaining companies are executing drastic triage strategies. First, they are pushing clean labels. Beyond Meat reformulated its flagship products, completely stripping out refined seed oils in favor of avocado oil to appease heart health organizations. Second, there is a major pivot toward a fungal renaissance. Brands are turning to mycoprotein because fungi naturally grow into complex, branching networks that mimic muscle fibers. This eliminates the need for heavy chemical texturization. Third is the hybrid compromise. Major meat processors are blending 70% animal meat with 30% fungi or soy. This lowers the environmental footprint and raw material costs without sacrificing the exact flavor and behavior of raw beef or chicken. Finally, companies are abandoning the center of the dinner plate entirely. They are moving into the functional nutrition aisle, targeting the millions of patients using GLP-1 weight loss drugs. By launching high-protein pastas and sparkling protein beverages, they are capturing a demographic that needs maximum nutrition in a much smaller caloric footprint. Strict veganism hovers around 1 to 3% of the global population. The industry finally recognized that survival requires integrating into the mainstream omnivorous diet rather than moralizing against it. Institutional capital is also moving away from heavily processed plant isolates. This bar chart compares recent public funding. Governments invested $203 million in advanced fermentation technologies, officially outpacing the $146 million allocated to traditional plant-based R&D. Companies are now deploying artificial intelligence to solve upstream processing bottlenecks. By using machine learning to rapidly scan billions of natural protein sequences, they can identify specific functional plant proteins and shrink research cycles from years down to days. The ultimate goal is precision fermentation. This process uses engineered microbes inside bioreactors to produce exact biologically identical copies of animal dairy and egg proteins, solving the taste, texture, and melt deficits without ever using an animal. The collapse of the speculative hype cycle marks the end of version 1.0. Securing the global food supply remains an ecological imperative, now shifting toward the steady, margin-disciplined progress of biomanufacturing.